Two old friends meet across shared meals. In the back room of a pet shop, the two men snack on dried shrimps and discuss fish breeding. In a remote new home in the mountains, they look for a solution to a weasel infestation. And during a dinner party in a blizzard, a mountain claustrophobia makes way for uneasy dreams. With emotional acuity and a wry humour, Weasels in the Attic is a squirming, uncanny reflection on masculinity, marriage, and the unspoken undercurrents of any relationship. There's an open conversation in the book community recently around the cartoonification of modern book covers. More specifically, the conversation relates to books featuring adult subject matter and themes being sold and marketed to readers, as if the intended audience for these stories were children or young teenagers. Researching the topic, I found an excellent in-depth video on the subject by Sarah Elizabeth. In their video, Sarah Elizabeth looks at the history of the book cover in the general sense, as well as exploring the evolution of the different trends and styles that have been popular with publishers and readers over the last 30 years. The author then returns to the main argument of the video, what they term as the cartoonification of book covers, and discusses the potential issues around presenting books with sexual themes, language and imagery, such as Icebreaker by Hannah Grace, or The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, in a style and aesthetic more closely characteristic of children's literature. I've linked to the video in the description below, both as a critical resource and because the topic felt relevant to something I wanted to talk about in relation to the book in question. Weasels in the Attic is a 2022 book by Hiroko Oyamada. A short book, barely even a novella, its narrative is structured around 3 interconnected short stories, each following the same small ensemble of characters as they grapple with themes of middle age, marriage, death, regret, and the responsibilities of parenthood. Granta Books, the UK publisher responsible for the British publications of Oyamada's work, including previous books The Factory from 2019 and The Hole from 2020, have leaned heavily into a unified aesthetic for the author, one that favours a bold, even garish use of colour, slightly rounded block lettering, and cute, picture book-like illustrations. From a design point of view, the covers are both striking and strikingly different. In an age of increasingly similar, almost uniform book cover designs, many of which feature blandly similar artwork, colour schemes and typography, the unconventional, strangely retro design for Weasels in the Attic immediately caught my attention when I saw the book displayed on the shelves of my local bookshop. If the intention of the publisher was to make the book stand out from a consumer perspective, then the design of the cover clearly worked for me. But what does this cover tell us about the book itself? Looking at the cover in relation to the title, what expectations might we as readers have of the story or stories contained herein? Does the choice of illustration suggest something irreverent, fun, cheeky? Something cute or quirky perhaps? A madcap farce in which the best efforts of our human characters to restore a family home are thwarted by a band of wily weasels intent on wreaking havoc, leading to a series of shared learning opportunities and life lessons rich in pathos. The ensuing struggle against nature as man and mammal attempt to find balance to coexist, playing out as part of a broadly parodic plot. But is this impression close to the reality of what the book provides? Is the cover accurate to the intentions and experience of the work itself? The short answer is no. Oyamada's book is not in any way cute or irreverent. It's not fun or colourful in its language, themes or characterizations. It's a sombre reflection on the malaise of male middle-aged anxiety, filled with brief sketches or reflections on life, death, and the relationship between husbands and wives, ending with a disarming moment of magical realism. The one actual sequence that relates to the weasels of the title is not some high-spirited comic farce, where cutesy animals get the best of their human oppressors in sharp, colourful fashion. It's a harrowing reminiscence from a character thinking back to a childhood memory, one in which her parents drowned a mother weasel in a bucket of cold water, the act of murder and the cries of the tortured animal providing a clear warning to other weasels of the same kin who might be considering making a home for themselves in the family's attic. It's difficult to think how such a horrifying sequence, one that suggests a myriad of connotations and interpretations specific to the book's themes of pregnancy, motherhood, and the more existential threat to the traditional family unit, inspired such a curious choice of cover. What was it about the act of drowning a weasel as a display of psychological eco-terrorism that suggested the appearance of this cute little critter, its button moon eyes and tiny white paws suggesting an air of playful curiosity at odds with the book's dispirited, defeated tone? If we compare the Granta Books edition to an earlier edition published by New Directions Books in 2022, the contrast between the two covers is stark. The latter is a much better, more accurate reflection of the book's tone and subject matter. The image of a goldfish trapped in a balloon against an indefinite blue background, suggesting the closeted circumstances of the central characters, and the vulnerability of the little worlds that they've created. The men trapped in a bubble of their own anxieties of a waning youth, where opportunities and freedoms of young adulthood have been replaced by the newfound domestic obligations of the home, and the women, trapped in the conservative expectations of their own patriarchal society, which defines them solely through obligations of marriage and children. While Oyamada's book is not graphic or sexual, like the books mentioned at the start of this review, the decision to market it with a cover more suggestive of a book intended for young children feels incredibly strange. While I did have some initial problems with the book, Weasels in the Attic did leave a lasting impression on me. I enjoyed the relaxed, minimalist style of the writing, the almost still life quality of the way the author describes the mostly interior settings, defined throughout by the placement of each character within a particular domestic tableau. I appreciated the accumulation of various themes and how these ideas are woven into the story, how the themes of marriage, commitment, birth, death, adult responsibilities, parenthood, and the anxieties of middle age reoccur through each of the three settings, finding new and different expressions across the imagery of a particular scene. As a style, it gives the book a very off-kilter, almost unreal feeling, as if the whole story might be a dream or a delusion unfolding at the moment of a person's death. The disjointed, episodic nature of the storytelling, and the repeated occurrences of the same specific imagery, exotic fish trapped in large tanks, the social and domestic ritual of sitting down to a shared meal, the literal breaking of bread, the repeated allusions to birth and death, and the symbolic changing of the seasons and the passage of time, make the book feel as if it's a kind of fugue, like a projection played out in the narrator's unconscious mind. That the story takes the form of a circular narrative, one that begins with the death of an old acquaintance and ends with the birth of a child, also felt incredibly significant to this reading of the work as a whole. The book reminded me somewhat of the work of filmmakers like Naomi Kawase, Mike Leigh and Sang-soo, where stories are framed around social and domestic interactions. Quietly observed scenes occurring around dinner tables or in living rooms, or in the quiet twilight moments where time seems to stand still. But any social realism of these extended domestic conversations is always offset by a feeling of the strange, the symbolic, the uncanny. As a personal criticism, I didn't always enjoy the voice of the characters, specifically the narrator. The characters are the product of a very parochial, narrow-minded, even conservative world, and their interactions are charged with reserved, even regressive ways of thinking. All the characters are snobbish and judgmental. They frown on each other for failing to achieve certain levels of success, or for failing to reach certain goals or milestones that people are expected to reach by a certain age. Things like settling down, owning a house, starting a family, are presented as aspirational targets that one must achieve so as not to be dismissed as a failure. Those that aren't able to conform to these same domestic aspirations, whether through choice, circumstances or biology, are looked down upon. This hectoring, judgmental tone extends to the book's objectifying descriptions of women's bodies and their appearances. The female characters scrutinise each other, and in turn are scrutinised by the men. They exist to serve, waiting on their husband's hand and foot, providing meals and sympathy, and being judged not just on a level of how young and attractive they are, but how successfully they provide a home for their husbands and children. Giving the book the benefit of the doubt, however, I'd prefer to assume these aspects are intended as social commentary or critique, exaggerating the boorish sexism of the male characters for the purpose of something ironic or satirical. But on occasion, it does feel like some of the more nuanced subtleties of the writing have been lost in translation. Despite these small misgivings, I still found the book incredibly thought-provoking. Its final scenes and the gradual progression of the writing towards something more poetic or strange really stays in the mind, to the point where I'm still thinking about the book several weeks after my initial reading. At the very least, it's a light, brisk read, and I enjoyed the way the different encounters between the two main characters kept adding colour and depth both to their relationship, as well as to our understanding of who they are as characters. I think the book does speak to certain anxieties faced by ageing millennials of the author's generation, and it does express interesting observations and reflections on death and domesticity. The sparse writing style and the paring back of literary excess really succeeds in heightening and elevating the book's emphasis on themes and ideas over the more conventional emphasis on action and plot. If you have any thoughts on the book in question or any thoughts on other books by Hiroko Oyamada, then please leave a comment below. I'd also like to say a very quick thank you to anyone who has subscribed, liked or commented on my videos so far. It's really very much appreciated. Having the opportunity to make connections with fellow book lovers from across the world is a genuine privilege. Until next time, thanks for watching.